Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Robert Borelli. What's up, man?
All right, how you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Well, that's good to hear. It's a pleasure and honor to be on your show, and hopefully we could do some good.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you coming on, and I want to try to get your story out to the people so we can maybe people don't have to go through the same things that you and I went through.
Amen, amen. There's a saying: smart people learn from their mistakes, but the Bible says wise people learn from other people's mistakes. So
Yeah,
hopefully we could share some of the mistakes we made, the bad choices that we made, and people wouldn't have to go through that. In other words, they don't have to go through what we went through to get to where we are today. We need a
exactly.
shortcut.
Where were you born and raised, and like what was it? When did you first notice that people around you weren't normal, as they would say, normal?
Well, I don't think I could identify with anything that was normal, to be honest with you. But I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was born and raised on. Well, I was born on Hull Street, and then moved to Fulton Street. So I was as a young kid. We used to have a gang called the FNR, Fulton and Rockaway.
Was your family involved in life?
No, my family wasn't. I had a legitimate family, but the neighborhood I come from, there was struggles. There's a lot of financial struggles. It was a poor neighborhood. Most people outside of that neighborhood look down on people like me. Basically people from Queens or different parts of Brooklyn. We were always like the troublemakers, so to speak. But when you go back into the days that I was born, a lot of the TV shows were gangster shows. You had Edward G. Robinson, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart. Angels with Dirty Faces. You had those little street gangs, and the gangs were pretty big back in the 50s and 60s.
If you don't mind me asking, what year were you born? When did you notice that people around your neighborhood, or when did you first start getting into mischief?
At an early age, like what we used to, and this is kind of funny because we used to have a fruit store that would have the fruit out on the streets. And I remember watching a movie where the kids, either it was the Bowery Boys or somebody, they would run by, grab fruit, and that's kind of like what we used to do to this fruit store guy. And then it just took him, I guess, maybe a couple of months to change it. What he did was he put the vegetables out there. So when we ran by, there was nothing to really grab because nobody wanted to grab a vegetable. But when he had the fruit out there, we used to run by, grab fruit. So we always kind of like that. You had the little rascals back in them days. It wasn't bad, but we tried to emulate that. So, when they say TV doesn't influence people, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't answer that there, but I know it did with kind of the people that I was around back in Brooklyn.
The people that were in the mafia, were they the people that you looked up to on the streets?
Well, everybody looked up to them on the streets, to be honest with you. I mean, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know mafia or anything. You got to remember, mafia didn't really get established until after the 60s, like maybe in the 70s when that name became big. Before that, there was a lot of, you didn't hear too much about mafia, and the federal government was always trying to prove there was a mafia, but it's not until, I forget, Joe Valachi was the first one to go and start giving up about the mafia. So,
Yeah.
but back in them days, so I didn't know, but I found out later on that my neighborhood was run by basically the Gambino crime family. There's a lot of movies made about my neighborhood, even before I was even born. We had The Dasher, we had Happy Maione. I forget the name of the movie that they made of these guys. And these guys went to the electric chair and all that there. So that was established in my neighborhood.
Yeah, that was Murder Inc. Murder
Murder
Inc.
Yes.
Yeah.
Murder Incorporated. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a senior moment every now and then, so you got to bear with me.
When you were younger, you saw movies about these people?
Well, that movie wasn't established. I think that movie didn't come out till the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, but their family still lived in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you were growing up around their children, their grandchildren, their families. But basically, these guys got a lot of respect, but from everybody in the neighborhood because they protected the neighborhood. I can give you stories where as I got a little bit older, 13, 14 years old, I would see the cops go to these guys and ask them for help when there's a lot of crimes being committed in the neighborhood, like burglaries and stuff like that. These guys
Yeah.
took care of the neighborhood pretty good.
Yeah, a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people understand that it didn't start off being like a criminal enterprise, and it was about helping the community.
From what I learned, and this was through an FBI agent who's been involved with organized crime a lot of years, and he told me back in Sicily. Now, how true it is, I don't know. So I'm just going to give you what the story I heard is that basically when it started, it was back. I'm thinking in the early 1900s when there was a lot of crime going on, a lot of evasions going on in Sicily. And these guys developed something to take care of because the politicians weren't helping. Nobody was doing anything for them. And these guys got together and started protecting the neighborhood. And then as they were doing that, they seen an opportunity to make some money. And basically, so from my understanding, these guys always protect the neighborhood. If they had a club in your neighborhood, you were a pretty safe neighborhood.
So what was your first like involvement with them?
Well, I don't like to get into the racial thing because it was racial, but I didn't know those words at that time. Basically, when I grew up, was you stood with your own kind. And I think everybody understood that. The blacks understood that. Spanish understood that. The culture in my neighborhood is if you went a 4-block radius, no matter which way you went, you're going to find a different group of ethnicity of people. So we had a public school right behind my house, and I was raised Roman Catholic. And we had a Catholic school that was in the black neighborhood. So we passed pats all the time. And we had this thing called a punk test. Don't ask me where it came from. I have no idea. But if you were walking and they were walking, whoever moved out of the way was going to be the punk. So nobody wanted to move out of the way. So you bumped into each other, and therefore, most likely there was a fight going to start. And that's just how it was.
Yeah.
And I was a kid, so I thought that was normal. If you want to talk about normal, I thought that was normal. Didn't know it was really not normal, but that's just how I grew up. So I was a fighter type. I was a small guy. I didn't want to be picked on. We didn't use the word bullied, but, people did pick on you when you were smaller or, whatever the situation was. So if you went into a black neighborhood, chances are you're going to get beat up. And if the black people came into my neighborhood, chances were they were going to get beat up. And that's the way it was. So I don't know. I mean, I was a tough little kid, and they seen that there in me, and they took a liking to me. And I remember the first time I went into their club, they gave me, and it's a stupid thing, but I tell the story anyway. Maybe a lot of people won't even catch it, but they gave me a quarter, and they told me, go next door, and there was this Italian candy store, and he says, get us a bucket of steam. I'm a kid, yeah. And I didn't know you can't get a bucket of steam. So I go with the quarter and ask the guy for a bucket of steam, and he gets mad at me, chases me out of the store. So I go back to the guys, and that was like kind of my initiation. How they would they liked me, and they would send me on kind of these things. That was kind of like broke me in, and then I would play pool with them, and then they would have some card games in the back, and I would serve drinks and stuff. They were very smart guys. They didn't want any gamblers to get off the table because they needed the card game to continue going. So they would serve drinks and sandwiches to them when they were hungry and they wanted something to drink. So I would run and bring them, and I would get tips, and that's just basically how I really started getting involved with them.
At this point, you're just an associate, and you're just not committing crimes for them, right?
Not at that point in time, and not even knowing that I was committing crimes, because they would send me to people's houses. Bookmaking was a big thing. Numbers was a big thing. So they would send me, and I'd pick up a slip off of somebody with a couple of dollars and bring it into them. But I didn't know I was committing any crimes at that point in time. As I got a little bit older, 15, 16, 17 years old, then I started understanding it a little bit more. But I was already bred into that lifestyle. So that was my life. Some people want the refinement. I want the gangster.
Yeah. So when you would hang out with your friends, was it like, our goal is to be made?
Well, I couldn't. See, I found out later on. I was probably about maybe 20-something years old, that I didn't have an Italian last name. See, this name that you're calling me by, Robert Borelli, was the name the government gave me through the Witness Protection Program. My real name was Robert Engel.
Yeah.
Now I'm not in the program no more, so I could talk about this yet. So my
Mhm.
real name, so I had an Italian father, so I couldn't get straightened out. So that kind of got me a little bit like, okay, so now I have to be maybe more like a Jimmy Burke. You know, Jimmy Burke couldn't get straightened out because he was Irish.
Yeah.
So I had to be kind of, I don't know if you know too much about Jimmy Burke, but he
Yeah.
was a big name, the Lufthansa and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
people had a lot of respect for him, even though he couldn't get straightened out.